So welcome back to another episode of Accountants Are Sexy, Change My Mind. As people might well know from this podcast, I run a business called Accounting Pirates, which seems like a bit of an odd name. So I get questioned on this quite a lot because accountants are not known for being very piratey. They're not known for wanting to go down that side of the life. They're more Navy people than pirates, I get told. But that's not necessarily true. And I thought one of the best ways to explain this concept to you is to bring on the person who inspired this entire change of brand, Mr. Sam Conniff. So, Sam, welcome to the show.
Kelly, thank you very much for having me. And this is a conversation I love to have. The pirates, I think, come from some of the most unexpected places. And as part of them, or some of the most exciting of the stories, are when you discover them in the places people least expect. I think that was kind of core to my journey of wanting to share the story of piracy because, this is a story about breaking rules, but really the rules that most people need to break with their own limiting factors. And when we start looking at some of the prejudices or stereotypes that we tell ourselves and tell others, and as soon as I saw what you've been doing with that, I loved it because you are breaking those taboos and breaking the ideas and the projections and limiting factors that people place upon themselves and titles and professions and anywhere. That's what we need to go looking for to change.
Yeah, well, when you did first notice what I was up to, I have to admit, and I don't often get this way, but I was totally fangirly. I was like, oh, Sam's just knows what I'm up to. How exciting. So I will admit that.
Well, I think that's how I felt when I can't remember what it was. You commented on a post of mine, or I commented on a post of yours, and I was like, "Who's this woman?" And it's like brilliant, and I was already excited anyway, just looking at what you'd done with it. And then when you said, well, "Actually, this is to do with the book," I think that's all. For me, there's two layers of surprise. It's firstly other people have got onto the same wavelength as me, and then when you said it was to do with the book, I'm like, "Wow!" Doubly surprised.
That's so cool. So for the people who don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm going to show this for camera, but obviously this is a podcast as well, we have two books here. This bright pink book was handed to me by who I would call my marketing twin, my buddy, Mr. Steve Mark. He's always sharing concepts with me. And he said, Kelly, read this book. I think you'll really enjoy it. And I was like, yeah, all right, whatever. And I did. This is a brand new copy because my dog-eared one with notes actually went off to somebody else. So this is brand new. And then I saw this came out, and this one is called How to Be More Pirate, and this has got co-authored with Alex Barker. And this is more of a guide onto how to use the concepts within the book to change the world, to do stuff bit by bit. So I've poured into both of them, and I think from my perspective, what they gave me more than anything else in the whole world is permission. And I find that a really weird concept because I thought I already had permission to do what I wanted to do. And that just said, no, Kelly, you can do it more. Does that make sense to you, Sam?
Makes total sense. And permission is often the word that I have concluded, certainly after all the interviews that Alex and I did. When the first book came out, it was kind of my love letter to rule breaking as I ended what was a 20-year career in trying to make a difference and predominantly work around young people. But what I was trying to do, much like you, was shift an industry. And I'd chosen the model of a marketing agency to see if we could both effect positive change in real human connections, but also could we prove a different model that wasn't so predominantly based on selling people shit they don't need. And you can, and then you can't. And the closer I got to places that I thought, oh, right, that's how we're going to change the world, whether it be politicians or prime ministers or the heads of business or policy, you'd always then run into exactly the same arguments and exactly the same bunch of grown-ups that are making it up, or exactly the same mistakes that we all tend to make. And it was in my kind of frustration at leaving that career, and also like the whole change industry. I was a social enterprise ambassador for Gordon Brown. I've been involved in change programs around the world. It's still the same old shit, really, that holds people back. And eventually I drew the conclusion that very often that was about rules. But then you sit people down, we can all get there. Whether it's the thing that you complain about when you get home to your partner, or it's the stuff that you always point out when you get to the pub, or the idea that goes in the ideas teapot and never goes anywhere. Whatever the levers of change that we have are, we've discussed them and we see them disappear in email threads where they go to die. And when you really start like nudging at it, we generally, I think we more often than not, we do have the solutions that we seek, and we typically have the resources. And so, what is the factor? And I think it's that point that we find it incredibly hard to give ourselves permission. And
Yeah.
so when the book came out, the first one, and I know you started receiving all these incredible stories, and I then felt really out of my depth and a bit overwhelmed, and like, oh my god,
I've
people
started
changing
something.
careers. Honestly, I remember the very first message I got was someone said, "Right, brilliant, your book was great. I've left my cushy corporate job, started a social enterprise," and I looked him up, and there were pictures of him and his kids, and I was like, "Oh my god, stop!" But of course, I
Please
didn't
be
want
able
him to
to put
stop.
food on the table.
Yeah. And I was like, "Can I help you at all?" Suddenly taking enormous responsibility. But the truth was that is exactly what I wanted to do, and I hadn't worked out that word. When I met Alex, it was incredibly helpful because she's really analytical and thoughtful, and she'd also been in the change industry and got a bit disenchanted with that. And she really brought the how. I was very much, here's what we can all go and do.
Yeah.
And she said,
Here's the
how does it
vision.
work? Yeah, how do people do that? And my conclusion at the end of How to Be More Pirate is that there's something about the story, there's something about the character, there's something about the avatar that allows us to step into it, and effectively all that euphemism or proxy is by saying be more pirate to each other, we're saying give yourself the permission you deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I say we, me and others in my industry choose a word of the year. And other people do this, but I see it quite a lot within the coaching, consulting kind of industry. So we choose the word that sets our intention for the year, and
Right.
it's like empowerment or success or something like that. And like that's been my kind of path for years. This year, it was audacious. And I
Nice work.
feel there was so much more power in that because I've stepped into this character that says, no, I'm going to ask for what I want. I'm going to change something. I'm going to ask more of the
Yeah.
world. And
Yeah.
that, once again, it comes back to this ethos and where this book has led me.
But I like that very much because we are creatures of habit. That's how we evolve, and it's really how we learn. We have this very predictive model of the world, and it updates through our lived
Yeah.
experiences. And so the brain will always seek the path of least resistance. So if you get into a habit and you consistently tell yourself you are something, then you will begin to follow that. The analogy that was given to me by the scientist who taught me something about brains was I've never been skiing, so I think this analogy works. But the kind of furrows that you get if you ski regularly, and then after a few days, you can only ski down those furrows, right? So you need new snow to come, so you can lay down, and that's the same way these neural pathways work. So every now and then, pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone or the stories that you're used to telling yourself is how you lay down new tracks and new stories. So deciding to be audacious is fresh snow. And then
Yeah.
the first few times you're skiing, and then wait a minute, I am fucking
Yeah.
audacious. And then you start to get comfortable skiing down that path, and an oversimplification, but it speaks to me of Be More Pirate and why it works for people is a bit like a fancy dress party. Right? I think no one likes the initial process of the fancy dress party because it's really awkward, and you have to
Nobody
you
knows whether everyone's going to be fancy dress or whether it's just
exactly
you.
exactly. And there's an inverse correlation, right? The more you go for it, the more fun it's going to be, but then the more awkward you're going to feel, like on the tube on the way there, dressed as a teapot or something. But then at a fancy dress party, you have, I don't know, like 36% more fun than a normal party because you're in a mask and there's a conversation, and it's just that. And I think there's something similar about being more pirate. There's an avatar. Right, okay, I'm going to step into this role. I'm going to get away with stuff because I'm now taking on this character who's a bit more swashbuckling or buccaneering or whatever those words mean to me. And so it's not a permanent state, but it allows you to step out of those well-trodden furrows that we all know too well.
Yeah.
Once
again, coming back to permission, thinking differently, being able to do something slightly different than your normal character would. So it's all permission. So
and identifying the things that you do that hold you back, and this happens to all of us. Identifying the telephone call that you're avoiding. The thing that's been at the bottom of your list for a whole week. And what is that about? And by beginning to have this understanding of the things that you're scared of, or the things that you're going to have to be audacious to go and do, you begin to spot those patterns a little bit more, and then you can call them out for it. And then, right, that bloody call at the bottom of my list is something I need to be a pirate about. So today's the day I'm going to do it. Pick up the phone And then you get then you get the benefit from taking on
So
your dragon.
can you get being a pirate wrong?
Oh yeah. I think so. Yeah, I think you can. Because I think there's a fine line, isn't there, between finding your confidence and being a bit of a dick, and I think it's subjective. And what might feel,
Didn't stuck my water out then, but yeah, absolutely.
I think on a number of different levels. I think the rules that I can break in the world as a middle class, middle aged man, white man with a certain degree of success, I can get away with stuff. So I should try and bend and challenge rules that are commensurate with the power that I've both inherited and worked hard to create. But there are times in my life when I felt really overwhelmed and quite vulnerable, and so then you have to take that into account. And then the things that you should be trying to shift and move should be equal to the level of energy and mental strength you feel. So that makes it a very hard thing to judge, right? Trying to be awesome on a day when you're feeling really unawesome is the right thing to do, but can make you feel worse. So I think it's a movable feast. It's entirely subjective, and I think that getting past those things that hold you back is often sometimes a relationship with both limiting factors, fears, and shame. And a really core part to being bold or brave is being good to yourself. Self-compassion is often the antidote to some of those feelings.
Yeah, that's for the programs that I have. That's a part of it. So I'm a marketing consultant. Just like that's my title, but I don't just deal with marketing because I deal with small businesses. I deal with the person, and if the person's not feeling up to it, then you have to work with that energy. You can't just say, go do it anyway and just charge through, because you have to work with the ebbs and flows of them personally.
Yeah, I think that's well observed. I think that, and that's more well observed than I was. I didn't, I wrote, in a way, I just wrote this book subconsciously to myself. But I think a lot of times people speak about change, we talk about the externalities of change. There's the new technology is arriving, therefore we need to adapt to it, and the market's changing, so we need new avenues to our audience, without recognizing that, oh my God, I feel really overwhelmed by staying up to date with that, or I don't want to go and speak to new audiences because wherever my energy levels are at. And so the change that has to happen within is often the most important part of it, and will be the thing that stops the change happening without. But recognizing that is really hard. And I think that's what I didn't intentionally know I was doing with being a pirate. We were talking about change, but kind of recognizing the relationship one has with oneself and our own barriers to that.
So what have been your learnings since writing this book, and the kind of the realization that comes afterwards? What have you learned about yourself through this process?
About a year or so after the book was out, I realized I really did write it for myself. That I was in a place in my life and relationships where I'd actually allowed fear to become quite overwhelming, and that the in inverted commas success that I'd had in the age of life I'd reached, I'd become more risk averse. I was more willing to compromise who I was, and all those kind of the boldness as you kind of come up in the world had begun to dissipate. And so, and I found myself being a different person from the different, I think this is normal, right? But I was being a very different person depending on the different rooms that I was in, because I was scared of the responses they would be or the pressures that were upon me. And I didn't want to admit that I didn't really enjoy being the CEO. My business Liberty had come like 100 people, and I didn't feel very good at it. But I couldn't also admit the bit I was good at was the ideas and the formation part, rather than running a large firm. And there were really big personal problems, and I was running from them. So, the sense of the gratitude I get from people who found a sense of identity and a sense of bravery in it, really, I know that I felt that too. It gave me exactly that. And I guess what I've learned is that that's, once discovered, not permanent. Then you haven't just got the treasure map, because it continues to move. Right? And so it's this constant bit of work. And probably that stuff from the book will talk about finding your fears and the things that have held you back. This kind of cascade happened to me of realizing the things that I've been scared of all my life are connected to that. And so my imposter syndrome, my permanent attempt to try and pretend to be a grown-up, then led to me being grown-up and always feeling like I was going to be found out. And so I now navigate towards knowing that I'm feeling like the same person no matter what environment I'm in is probably a really good sign. And knowing that, I also identify. I've even on my to-do list, I've got one of those kind of boards. Here's the boring things you're going to get done today. Here's the exciting things. And I keep a list of the demon things. What are the things I'm putting off? What are the things that make me feel uncomfortable? And I can't do them all in a day. But when I feel them, and I'm or I delete it in my head, or just put it away. All right. So I'm getting better at navigating, gently and safely towards the things that scare me, because I know those are the blockers. And I've identified a few things that when I'm limiting me as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've got a similar process that I created myself with a blank kind of journal. So I've got a to-do list, all the things that are in my head that that I feel are important at that moment. Then on the opposite side, I've got a done list.
Yeah.
So I look at the end of the day and I'm like, why didn't I do what I said I was going to do? Why didn't I do that? And why did I choose that? And was that the right decision to make? Because then I feel like I'm actually getting a sense of of what I'm avoiding and not just what I'm doing. So
Brilliant.
It helps me kind of make better decisions.
Yeah, exactly that. And it becomes a bit like a game of emotional whack-a-mole, doesn't it? You're like, oh, right, there's that feeling. I used to deal with that in a very different way, like distraction or avoidance. Or you really start to realize so many of the practices that you've learned in your life are actually avoidance techniques. And I think that, if it was one thing, it's probably that sentence around here be dragons. These are the things that scare you, and they're all connected to the same place. And when you can spot them, you don't always have to go and fight dragons every day. That'd be exhausting. But I found a place to identify them, so I know I can navigate back towards them. If you're navigating generally back towards your fears, you're probably going in the right direction, the direction of growth and exploration and discovery and all the things I think are important to me.
Yeah. And I think it enables you to find the right support as well. I think that's something that's happened to me through looking at this process. I've said, I keep doing this part wrong. Like, not like wrong as in making mistakes, just I haven't gone full charge with it, or I avoid it, or I put it off. So I find the right people to help me do the right things. And my life has got so much better just for admitting that actually I'm not amazing at everything. I've got my limits, and I should live within my. I don't really enjoy the term zone of genius, but that's what it is. I should live within what brings me, my life, fullness.
Yeah.
Which is hard to find, isn't it? It's hard.
Yeah, I think it really is. But it's such an exciting and interesting and terrifying concept to imagine. Like, so it feels like a cliched question. I think a bit like just a zone genius, but there's truth in those things. Like, what would you do if you weren't scared? And it's a scary question to me. And I think being part is very much around that. And I think for the years before then, working in social enterprise was also a similar job on working out some of my internal issues, because I found a safe place helping others. And it was just a really, in one sense, it's a really great way to avoid working on myself, because it kind of legitimized it. And I think that's a fairly classic entrepreneurial trope anyway, because it's a really great way for lots of people of burying themselves in really wonderful and meaningful distractions that are good for the world. But in doing that, it's also a way to avoid certain inner things, which can feel pretty terrifying. So I hear that deeply. And then there's a day that comes, I think, where you realize if you are at all, or I was certainly uncomfortable with aspects of myself or what I thought of myself, you begin to realize that you are who you are because of all the shit, and not like in spite of it, or not trying to fix myself or get to a better version of it. And it'll all be all right when I get here. When I've done this and that, then I'll be okay. And you start. One of the
things I learned was you can be successful and still be shit. Like, your life doesn't have to be in perfect order to still succeed at life.
Yeah. And also that is the goal, right? It's an unobtainable goal. Enjoying things when they are a bit shit. And I think that also came out being part of this notion that mess and success are totally interrelated. And the mess is a necessary precursor of any success, but also that doesn't mean that all mess leads to success, right? Just means that mess is a semi-permanent place. And trying to eradicate that is actually a false fight, and that's not what we're here for.
Yeah. So let me ask you then, do you have pockets of uprisings all over the place? Mm-hmm. So obviously there's myself, and I'm now connected with people because they see pirates and they're like, I'm a pirate, have you read the book? And I get sent shanties and what was it? metal bands. I can't remember the name of the metal band, but they are a pirate metal band, which is amazing. So I get sent amazing stuff like this. So you must get swathes more. So how do you feel about all these pockets of pirates uprising?
Well, I think to begin with, like I said, I felt quite overwhelmed, and there was a few months in the book came out, and I had to create a folder so I could ignore the people who were getting in touch with me because it just felt like this sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
And then, luckily, I found my way to Alex, and actually someone who got in touch was like, "I really love what you're doing in this movement. Can I support you?" And he gave me a bit of money to be able to employ Alex for a few months to get it off the ground. Um,
Amazing.
yeah, yeah, and then I think that's what it forced me to come to terms with the degree of imposter syndrome that I was having because I hadn't realized that I was writing it for myself and I didn't necessarily believe it that others were having this beneficial experience, that there must be a mistake. And then gradually started to own it a little bit more.
Yeah.
And now I was taught this. A sure sign of someone who's struggling with some kind of inner worth issues is someone who can't take a compliment. And it was effectively that, not being able to take the compliment that someone followed in the wake of your work. So I had to work really hard on it. And now I sit and listen. And so, 3 years ago, I might have ignored this conversation or just scurried away. And so now I'm much better at welcoming them and embracing them. I just finished some work last week with the NHS. The NHS is probably the biggest hotbed of pirates. So, into the topic we started with, it might not be where you'd expect it, but we've seen the book be taken up again. There's I think it's almost monthly online meeting of NHS pirates from different parts of the sector. And this particular group I'm working with is in mental health provision in one of the biggest regions in the country. And they just recount to me what they've done over a series of workshops, the things they're doing differently, the permission they're giving themselves, the agency. And when we talk about rule breaking in a world where lives are at stake, the truth is, Doorne-Millott talks about rule breaking, but everyone I've ever heard from has been rule making. They've been making the new rules for their life to make things better and do things differently and challenge the notion that the way things are is the way they have to be, when of course that's not the truth. So now, I feel a deep sense of pride, and maybe I'm grateful for that journey that I went on by not being able to take responsibility at first. I don't feel that I'm responsible for those acts, but I can still feel deeply proud of my, being a small part of the dynamo. Yeah, exactly. Of opening the door. And I know how I felt that with the books, with the authors, or the films, or the bits of culture and art that have helped me view the world differently. And that's inspiring. And it means I'm writing again and I'm working again and trying to do similar kind of projects, which for a while I really felt quite nervous of. So, yeah, I'm very grateful for it.
So I've got a couple of questions. One, what's next for Accounting Pirates? That's me. What's next for Be More Pirate? What's the plans there? Do you have any?
Yeah, so Alex and I, we meet up every week, and the conversation is at the moment is very much around this community. It's quite loose knit. Alex does a great job of being the kind of central hub, but she really encourages lots of self-organizing. There's not a week that goes past where I don't get contacted to run a workshop, get an update, hear an amazing story. The book's 5 years old, and it's still going so strong. So we are talking about how do we really, put some more substance into that network? How do we make it more supportive? How can we make it pay for itself? How could we create a pirate fund? How can we invest in this for kind of the next round? So that's getting us both really excited. I'm also writing again. I had in my head very originally, it was a trilogy of books. And one was around piracy. One was around the informal economy, because so much of the work I'd done was with young offenders, and just the level of innovation that I'd met with people who built careers in non-traditional, non-mainstream economies. And the third was around migrant communities, the most successful of all kind of entrepreneurial communities in all history, yet also the same group always gets the wrong end of the press's and society's attention. So I saw it as be more migrant, be more pirate, and be more gangster. So still exploring these ideas, and I've gone back.
Fan. I'm like, be more gangsters up my road. I can do that.
Yeah, exactly. And why is it? Why is it that is this huge compliment, and also this terrifying component of culture?
Really does depend on what side you're on.
As it does with pirates, as it does with migrants, and as a kind of trilogy of arguments, I was really excited about it, and I kind of shelved them, I think, when I had a bit of a loss of confidence a year or so after the book came out. And I've gone back to them this year, and I'm really excited with where I'm at, and I'm nearly ready to start sharing this with the world.
Yeah, that's really exciting. The book is so well written I really enjoyed all of it. So I will be there for your next one for sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're not focused on the pirate side of it right now. Because you're a creative man. You're looking at uncertainty, and this is a topic that I think the majority of accountants sit in. There is a lot of uncertainty, especially coming off the back of the pandemic, which is still getting talked about. There's still a massive hangover there, and about like the future, and they're not. And once again, generalizing, I always say I'm generalizing. This is not individual accountants I'm talking about. This is a generalization. But they're not, they're risk averse, typically. They don't like to live in uncertainty because they're trained to complete tick boxes, make sure things are accurate. So when there is uncertainty around, it kind of freaks them out a little bit, which is why Accounting Pirates was born, is to say, come on, like, let's shake it up. You can be creative in certain areas of your life. So, what are you doing with uncertainty at the moment? Like, where's that project?
So, to me, there's quite a clear line with Be More Pirate, because it's about taking inspiration from the edges. I think that the world you've just described for accountants is just a very, very human thing. It is in our nature to look for patterns, especially when the world doesn't make sense. And it creates a bit of a paradox for human beings, because the world is more uncertain than ever. And that's, the world has always been the most uncertain ever through human evolution. But by a number of objective sources, from the World Economic Foundation Forum to The Economist, we live in this profoundly uncertain time. And yet our tolerance for uncertainty is decreasing. And tolerance for uncertainty is a really important thing, because it drives strategic decision-making, creative problem-solving, empathy and ability for collaboration. People get on better or get on less. People are more prone to fall for extremist ideologies or even fake news, the lower their tolerance for uncertainty. And you kind of get it, right? Throughout history, we'll all fall for a simplified, backward-looking narrative. Make this great again, take back this, when we feel really uncertain. But we'll absolutely, and there's great studies that back this up, actually. People were given a game to play, and if the game, you extend this period of uncertainty, whether or not you're going to get an electric shock. And so consistently, people will choose to have the certainty of giving themselves an electric shock over the uncertainty of whether you might get an electric shock. We prefer pain to the possibility.
Just get it done over the, just get it out of the way.
Yeah. It's shown on waiting lists as well. People say they would prefer to get a negative diagnosis rather than wait any longer. We're profound. And then we mistake in the world of accountancy and lots of aspects of business. There's a big difference between risk management, which we can do, but risk management is often percentages and variables, which we do in forecasting and reforecasting, and yet that's quite different from uncertainty. And uncertainty, when embraced, is a generative force. It forces us to think differently, explore the ambiguous, try and get more comfortable with the uncomfortable, and then in this negative space, suddenly we'll find new ways of doing it. It will always drive creativity in us, but it doesn't feel nice. Because on an evolutionary level, we've survived this long by avoiding threats and uncertainty, but that's no longer possible. So, and then this project came in the midst of the pandemic, but it was very much inspired by, I think this is the norm, right? Why do we all think that so much needs changing, yet it's very, very hard to create change? And it's that feeling of discomfort the unknown provides to us, especially if we've had careers or upbringings where providing certainty is part of our job. And so I started finding people who were really good at uncertainty, because I think a lot is said around it, but we follow stories. And so I went and interviewed refugees who'd become CEOs. I went and interviewed people who'd been through mental health crisis or gender transition, people who'd been prisoners of war and were now leaders in their own right, people who'd been through the justice system and were now law reform activists, people who'd been smugglers and were now trauma specialists. And so I really looked for people who'd been in a profound moment of uncertainty that had given them a certain set of techniques and tools for spotting opportunity, and they were very opportunistic, really, smart people, and then they'd use those skills to become leading lights in society. And then I found an amazing scientist who also specialized in uncertainty, but she really understands kind of the brain and the body, so the logical aspects of us and why our brains work in a certain way, but also the emotional aspects of us and why we sometimes make decisions that we might not want to. And we partnered up with the decision-making and uncertainty laboratory, particularly niche lab at University College London, part of the brain sciences team. And we built this remarkable thing. and it exists online, and we present it as a documentary. It's got 3 episodes in it where I interview these remarkable characters and then these remarkable scientists. Questions are posed to the audience which help them get past the negative aspects of uncertainty. We do really robust scientific assessments before and after of a person's ability to turn uncertainty into opportunity. And with a remarkable success rate, about 95% of people see a 30% increase in their uncertainty tolerance. So their ability for making decisions when the world hits the fan, or finding new solutions, or collaborating amidst the unknown. And it's just taken off. It really has. We've created something for the moment that we're all in. So we've been working with some government departments, charities, NGOs, small organisations, individuals, big, massive brands. As people think, as you just said, realise that there's so many challenges at the moment, but there's one thing that joins them all up, and it's uncertainty. And if you begin to increase your tolerance to uncertainty, it provides not just, oh, right, this feels a bit more tolerable. It actually provides these really powerful tools.
Yeah. See, I've taken one of your tests because I obviously follow a lot of what you do. And my tolerance level was quite high, but that wasn't surprising for me, because I feel like I'm always searching for another thing. Like I'm seeking out new stuff constantly. So you can't seek out new stuff with an intolerance.
That's a very good technique for uncertainty tolerance. Is a malleable thing. You can train it, and a really good way is to continuously put yourself in the position of being a beginner. Learning is one way of doing it. Meta learning, or metacognition, they call it.
But what I've come to realise is that's in the side of my brain that I want to focus on. Right. I also have a side of my brain that is intolerant to change and wants this comfort zone and wants to keep it small and wants to keep me safe. And I've read books like, I can't remember the name, but it talks about the reptilian style brain.
Yeah.
The monkey mindset one.
Yeah.
And that didn't resonate with me. It didn't resonate at all until I started looking into your uncertainty part, and I realised that whilst the bit that I want to focus on is happy to be uncertain, the bit that I don't want to focus on and I want to keep safe and I want to hide away is intolerable to change. And that was a realisation I didn't know.
Well, I think you've really identified that paradox is the heart of all of this, and we are all finding out those paradoxes is really useful, and we all have them. Key to this work, I didn't understand this, was the psychobiological nature of it. And up until around 200 years ago, it's widely thought our brains and our bodies were deeply separate. Since then, there's been this journey of understanding. And I, you asked the biggest impact of being a part of me, the biggest impact of uncertainty experts on me has been understanding this. I've always thought I can think my way out of anything.
Yeah.
I've known I can be quite smart. I can push myself through something. I can negotiate. I can spot patterns. But my problem is when my body doesn't want to play, those feelings can be intolerable. When I found myself, either drinking too much or partying too much or distracting myself, I'll do anything to get off starting fights because my emotions are at odds with my thoughts, and that creates a real tension in me. And that's because primal survival stuff plays out in your body in a really different way. And there's this notion called embodied cognition, and it's effectively the idea. A simplification of the argument is that we have two brains, right? And what they really mean is there's two decision-making centers. And there's the millions of sensors in your gut and all around your body that act as a radar that enable you to know which way is up, and what the temperature is, and whether you can trust someone. And then there's your brain that has its much less processing ability.
Yeah.
And when they start working in tandem, you're picking up on everything. And that's really necessary for uncertainty. But it's been really uncomfortable for me coming to terms with it. It's not been my default. But getting those two parts of yourself to work more in partnership has been really, really profound actually for me. But it's a similar part of it, that deep and primal bit versus the more evolved, or certainly where I'm more comfortable, prefrontal cortex bit.
There's too much information up here. That's what I find. Like you can't sort through it. There's too much. So I often just rely on intuition now. Like this is how I feel about the situation. And also I have ADHD, so I can't always recall the information, but I can recall the feeling of that information. So it's
looking into. We've had a really. I say this carefully. We've had a lot of conversations around ADHD and other aspects of neurodiversity, people who've gone through uncertainty experts. We didn't design it with that in mind, but we've realised that most of the people involved have a degree of neurodiversity. The way that it's set up and structured, the way we tell stories, seems to have really resonated and worked with people who do. And the tools that we've got seem to also really work because it's a non-reliance on the typical, which is, right-brained, right-sided thinking processes,
Yeah.
And one of the big words that's really stuck with so many people is around interoception, which is really kind of one of the explanations of intuition. And interoception, therefore, it's a sense. There are 7 senses that mainly we know about: sight, sound, smell, taste, etc. They're all external ones. Interoception is the sense of your internal feelings. And it's like kids have bad interoception because they don't know if they're worried or they need a wee. And hopefully we've got better interoception. But your ability to stop and go, what is that feeling? And where does it come from? And it's from that difficult meeting I had earlier on, but that threat feeling has stuck with me. And now I'm in a different meeting, but I'm still responding in a certain way.
Yeah.
And then being able to regulate that. And my God, it's like game changing. That 8th sense for me has really helped me understand and navigate, make decisions a little bit better.
You have to know yourself so well, and that's, people don't necessarily take the time to know themselves. They're so charged with like going forward and doing like the success thing and building the business or raising a family that they stop to think about themselves so much. That takes time, and it's quite scary as well because not everybody wants to know themselves.
Amen. I hear you so much. I used to be so frustrated when people would say, I don't know why you're so worried then. Just be yourself. And I'm like, which one? I don't know.
It's me.
Yeah. And then, and this is key to being an entrepreneur, right? That is a version of yourself that you probably quite like or want to be. So you project that and try and habit that, but that's a bit exhausting for a time.
Yeah.
And then there's a part of me that just doesn't want to go out, wants to be at home, or there's a part of me that just wants to be with my kids, and there's a part of me that feels awful that I'm a terrible dad. And like, it's like I think of it sometimes as the worry go round. When I'm at work, I'm worrying about whether I've been a good dad at the weekend, or but then with my kids, I'll pick them up tonight and I'll be worrying about why I didn't do at work. And you're like, why can't I worry about the thing that I'm doing when I'm doing it?
Yeah. It's the being present, but that's so hard in itself.
Yeah. And I think that's why things like Be More Pirate and Uncertainty Experts work, because they are journeys into finding out not necessarily who we are, because I think that changes, but who we want to be. And then knowing who we want to be, then we can take actions to step towards that person.
Mm.
You are in direct relationship with the actions and the decisions that you make, and it's the actions that are remembered, and it's what remains that counts. And that's those kind of principles. This goes back to Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. It's really important. And I think that's why Be More Pirate has helped me so much, because I'm less a work of keeping up with what I've done before and tolerating the mistakes that I've made. And I'm slightly clearer on, this is who I really want to be. This is what I really believe in. There's points in the book, those questions, what things would you be willing to fight for? I've gone back to them so many times. And knowing that I damn well don't want to be a hypocrite, that I did write this as much to myself, that I'm so in awe of the people who've taken it on board, that I want to live up to it as well. And so I continually navigate towards things that scare me. I do have a very clear idea of the father I want to be, and the partner I want to be, and the person I want to be, and the work I want to do in the world. And even like this morning, you had that feeling like, God, I don't want to face today. But those are the reasons why I will face today, and not cancel on the things that make me feel uncomfortable.
This sense of purpose. Like it's so important. I've never had it. I've never had it. I never needed it before, because I was floating along in life quite happily. And I was just floating, and everything was just like, oh, it will be, it won't be. Now I feel like I've got this sense of purpose and this drive and ambition and something. And I'm the world means a little bit more to me than it did before. That's what this has done, this journey.
A final thing that I learned in Uncertainty Experts, and if you haven't gone through the whole thing, if you'd like to join us, we're running one in October, from October 17th. And you would be my guest. Let's come and see. We can do the whole thing. And I'd be happy to give you a discount code or a code for the community to come along and join it as well. Like all fellow pirates, come and pile in.
Yes, let's share that.
Towards the end, I learned something called construal theory, and it's about the two sides. Because I think purpose can be quite daunting for people, and some people really feel that they haven't got one. And also, all of us rely when we need to every now and then on writing another list and trying to get through that simple things. When I'm not feeling very good, give me a few easy tasks. I'll go and hide in my inbox. On their own, either one can be a bit dangerous. Together, they work really well. And that's what construal theory is about. The analogy that I read is if you're climbing a mountain, you have to hold in your mind that the purpose is to summit the mountain, right? But if you constantly just try and look at the top of the mountain, it's too daunting, it's too far away, and every time you think you get to a peak, there's another bloody peak.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is you have to look at your feet and look at the feet of the rest of your team and just one foot after the other. But then remind yourself when you're freezing, it's just footsteps to the purpose. And it's like this gear shift between the two things. And if we all move from that,
the overwhelm, the giant, and then the manageable.
Exactly. And so your purpose, right, okay, I need to check in with that a couple of times today because it's a tough day, but I also need my really clear list that I've written. And so it's kind of as a way of switching between the two sides of this. It's a way between switching between the practical and the purpose. It's two different kinds of energy. There's nothing as satisfying as ticking off a couple of small things. And then when that becomes demotivating, I want something big again. And it's this really interesting capacity. And I use it, and if you go back to to-do lists, right? At the beginning of my to-do list, I've written, these are the 3 big things I want to achieve this year. And then right next to them, and here's the 5 things I've got to do today. If these 5 things connect to those 3 things, then my life makes a bit more sense.
Yeah, I explained a very similar concept in my Facebook group today. Like, that's how I break things down, even weight. Like, there is a certain amount of weight that I want to lose. But if I focus on that big number, it's demotivating. Like, I'm not going to lose that tomorrow, so I'm not going to do it. Like, it doesn't motivate me to take action. If I say, I want to lose 2 kilograms, I can see that coming off and I can see that being really achievable. So I know I'm going to get that little rush of like, I've achieved this goal.
Yes.
And then I can go, right, another 2 kilograms. But the weight I want is like more than that. So break things down, small, manageable.
And that's, I think, the scientist I work with on uncertainty experts, she relates Beamer Parrott uncertainty experts by saying Beamer Parrott was very good at getting people to step into the unknown. Uncertainty experts helps people navigate once they're in the unknown. I was like, oh, right, that, and obviously there's some like kind of line through them from me, but I hadn't even seen it like that. And it's exactly that. When you then step out into the unknown, you need those small steps that you can believe in, and something that you can use to shine a light out into the dark.
Yeah. Right. So we have overrun. There was no surprise. Like, I've loved talking to you, but I have a final question I always end the episode on. So, Sam, what is the sexiest thing about accountants?
I think it's the same thing to me that's sexy about scientists. Just some people I've spent quite a lot of time with recently, because they empower me in a world of information that I often feel overwhelmed by. Finances was a real Achilles heel for me. I'm one of those people that gets a letter through the door with a window in it, and I'm like, I don't know where it's gone. I filed it behind the sofa. And I'm lucky to work with some really sexy accountants who empowered me with some knowledge, and a combination of both the practical things I need to do and the emotional things I do. Much like the scientists who explained to me why I might trigger internally, but here's some tools that you can use for it. And anyone who shines a light through complex information, who makes it simple and turns it into a toolkit, in my mind, is a pretty sexy someone.
That is a very reasonable answer, and I am there with you as well. I don't know where my letters go either. Right, Sam, it's been an absolute pleasure. Please, make sure that I get the links and the discount codes or whatever it is you want to send to me, so I can get this out to the world. Did you say it was October 13th? Is that the right date?
October the 17th. It starts for 4 weeks. But yeah, I'll grab that list and send it over now, and we can set you up as an affiliate, all that kind of stuff. I hadn't even thought about that. So yeah.
Excellent. So I suggest anyone who's listening to this will go and explore this, explore Sam's books for one, and explore what he's up to with uncertainty, because I think it's a game changer. I really, really do. I think if you can just embrace that side of yourself, you will change the way that you operate in your business. And for my goal, you will change the world as well. So thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me, and I'll catch you next week.